This episode is brought to you by Iams Pet Food. When you choose Iams dry dog or cat food, you can see a difference in your pet with your own eyes. Healthy energy in 5 days, healthy digestion in 10 days, and healthy skin and coat in just 25 days. Satisfaction for you and them. Guaranteed or your money back. Feed Iams dry dog or cat food and see a visible difference. Visit iams.com/difference to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by United Airlines. When you want to make the most of your vacation, book with United. They're an airline that cares about your travels as much as you do. United is transforming the flying experience with Bluetooth connectivity, screens, power at every seat, and bigger overhead bins to help fit everyone's bag. And with their app, you can skip the bag check line, get live updates, and more. Change the way you fly. Book your next trip today at united.com.
It gets to a point with the breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, snacks in between. Snacks alone will kill you. I mean, that's a 24-hour job. That could be a whole episode in and of itself, snacks.
That's Kelly Senyei. She's a professional chef and mother. You'll hear more from her on this episode. And she's right. Snacks for my kids did nearly break me a few times. There are just so many of them. There are days when kids don't eat anything. There are days that they eat one great meal and don't touch another thing. And there are days that they just keep asking for another snack. They are growing and changing, so it's really not a kid's fault. It's natural. But keeping snacks on hand, getting creative when kids are bored with foods, that is a whole other thing. I had a snack drawer in my kitchen. It was the bottom drawer, so my kids could get in there without my help. And it was full of packaged, over-processed foods. So today's episode should be called, You Can Survive Your Kids' Snack Stage. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the pediatrician next door. I'm that doctor friend you call for practical advice about your kids' health. I mix the science of medicine with the reality of parenting. I want you all to meet Kelly Senyei. She's the founder of Just a Taste food blog, where she makes easy but impressive meals and snacks. She's a Columbia University trained journalist. She has a culinary arts degree from the Institute of Culinary Education in New York City. She hosts the Sports and Forks podcast. And if you aren't excited enough to meet this amazing woman, she also has 4 young kids, and I am their proud pediatrician, as you may figure out from our conversation. I try to teach my patients and their families something about health, but my patients teach me a lot too, and that's why I asked Kelly to talk with me. I can talk all over the place about which healthful foods your kids should eat and how you can start them on solids, blah, 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 but that's not reality. What's the secret to get kids to eat great? You have to beg and bribe. Okay, no, that's not true. Let's ask a professional chef for her tips and tricks for keeping food fun and interesting for us as the home chef and for our kids. I know a lot of parents have a hard time getting their kids to eat some of the foods that we want them to eat. So a lot of parents will hide the foods, which I am not a big fan of because, first of all, if you hide spinach, they are going to find it, or they're not going to trust you. But also they don't recognize the foods they're eating. We want them to learn how to recognize foods. So what are some creative ways that parents can introduce these ingredients? I'm going to tell you a few in a way that appeals to kids. Okay, so this is my first one because I want to eat more of this. Okay, it's sardines. How can I get sardines into our diets?
I knew you were going to say that. And I'm going to be honest with you, Dr. Hunter, that is a stretch for any kid. We got to be realistic here. But that doesn't mean I don't have a solution. Okay, so sardines are in kind of the anchovy family. They're a little bit larger. So you have to keep in mind that sardines are traditionally served fully intact, right?
Mm-hmm. Bones and all, right?
Exactly. Your eyeballs, tails, all of the things. So that's like a science experiment to kids in and of themselves. But I will say this, sardines, one of the best way to go about it, and we'll talk about fish too, because I'm a big advocate for kids eating fish. And there's a lot of different tips and tricks that you can do to get them to have fish. I think the key with sardines and any other kind of tricky ingredient is what you're pairing them with. So sardines are very salty. They have a very umami-rich flavor. And this is not something that I would expect any parent to know or understand, but that's why you and I are chatting. I want to give as many tips and tricks as possible. So you have to figure out what can you balance that with. You would never do sardines with soy sauce. You would never do sardines with, mushrooms or anything else that has like a really umami, salty flavor. You want to try and cut some of that saltiness. So you would pair that with tomatoes, a really bright, acidic vegetable. And the great thing about, or fruit, I guess tomatoes are technically a fruit. The great thing about tomatoes is they puree very easily, as do sardines, minus the bones, I will say. But you need to be able to pair ingredients with things that offset the strong taste and texture of them. So I don't think a kid, realistically, at least my kids, are not going to eat a sardine, bones and all, and eyeballs and everything. But if I cut that fillet off and I throw it in the blender or add it to their bolognese, they're not going to notice it. But I am going to leave the salt out of whatever recipe I'm making, because you have to keep in mind sardines are very salty. It's kind of like when you add Parmesan cheese to a recipe. Most of the time, if a recipe is well written, it won't call for additional salt until the very end of the dish when you're finally tasting and seasoning. So you just kind of have to keep those things in mind. Again, kids have very particular palates. And so any sort of additional saltiness is going to be kind of like a red flag in their head. And not that we want to hide it from them, but you don't necessarily need to draw attention to the fact that it's in there.
I love that answer. Is there a difference from anchovies?
No, I would do them in the same way. The only great thing about anchovies is they're classically found in Caesar dressing, of course. Right. So my kids are on a huge salad kick right now, which I know sounds very unrealistic, but I've gotten them into Caesar salad. And again, it's a very creamy, fat-based dressing, but there are ways to substitute. I actually have a recipe in my cookbook that's a Caesar dressing made with avocado as the primary fat instead of some of the creaminess like mayo or heavier, denser fats. You could throw sardine fillets in there, but you could throw anchovies in there and they won't even recognize it. So again, not big into disguising foods, and that's not the whole goal of the secret ingredient cookbook. Yeah. It's more just kind of educating yourself to know like what pairs well together to kind of minimize those stronger flavors.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm advocating, is integrating foods into your child's diet. So you've got some really good tips. Okay, how about beans and lentils and chickpeas?
Okay, I absolutely love this one. I'm going to say something that you're probably going to be like, no, that's not, I would never do that, or I could never think to do that. So beans in particular, lentils will work similarly, but beans in particular work as a phenomenal thickener in soups. Stay with me here.
Oh, no, I do this all the time.
Oh, do you really? Okay, good. All right. So it's not crazy. So when I make my tomato soup, which my kids love with grilled cheese, a very classic, simple thing, I actually puree white beans and I make them into kind of what's called a slurry or a thickener. And then that gets blended into the soup. And it does two things. One, it makes it incredibly creamy without adding any dairy. So if you have a kid with a dairy allergy or an intolerance, you don't have to add heavy cream or milk or butter to thicken anything within the soup. But it also adds that unbelievable protein, which I'm a huge advocate for, and nutritional value that just beans, legumes, even lentils have. So pureeing them, adding them into the soup, it adds a creamy consistency and you get all that flavor. And then kids aren't left, just eating a straight bowl of beans. Again, not trying to disguise it, but just creative ways to incorporate it and know that like, okay, my kid's realistic. I'm a very realistic parent. I know I text you this all the time. Like you have to be realistic when it comes to feeding kids. Like my kids eat Cheez-Its. My kids eat packaged snacks. They're not getting a gourmet meal every night. We love Applegate chicken nuggets. Like you have to be realistic when it comes to feeding kids.
I add a can of blended chickpeas to my mac and cheese for the same reason. Mm-hmm.
Genius.
With blended carrots too.
Yes, you can do it with vegetables. I mean, it's amazing the thickening properties that certain ingredients have. And then you can eliminate the dairy. You don't have to add all the cream or the milk or whatever it may be. And you still get that really smooth consistency. And again, it goes back to the kid's mouthfeel and like what they're tasting. Can they sip it from a straw instead of using a spoon? And that's something we'll talk about in a second because I brought props.
Yes, I do want to see your props. Okay, so talking about dairy, I want to come to yogurt. And one thing I wanted to say about yogurt is that a lot of people don't realize it doesn't have a lot of vitamin D in it. So don't necessarily count that as your dairy source of vitamin D. But A lot of kids love yogurt. They have no trouble eating yogurt. But what are some of the creative ways that we can incorporate yogurt, and specifically like unflavored Greek yogurt, into the diet?
Greek yogurt, I think in particular, is a really tricky one because of the tanginess. So if kids are traditionally used to the yogurt smoothies or the pouches, which generally have a lot of added sugar to them, it's hard to get them turned on to an ingredient that's much thicker and much more sour in taste. So I found two primary tricks. The first one is peanut butter. If your child doesn't have an allergy,
I love that. Or almond butter.
Or almond butter or sun butter, blended into Greek yogurt and then poured into a popsicle mold makes the most amazing. You could add a little bit of honey if you wanted, or cocoa powder, kind of sweeten it. But the combination, again, pairing the ingredients, peanut butter that's very salty and savory with the bright acidic tanginess of Greek yogurt, they mellow each other out and they make the smoothest popsicle on the planet. I have found that if you put it on a stick and you freeze it, my kids will eat it. I think I should get a tattoo that says that. Put it on a stick, my kid will eat it.
This episode is brought to you by United Airlines. When you want to make the most of your vacation, book with United. They're an airline that cares about your travels as much as you do. United is transforming the flying experience with Bluetooth connectivity, screens, power at every seat, and bigger overhead bins to help fit everyone's bag. And with their app, you can skip the bag check line, get live updates, and more. Change the way you fly. Book your next trip today at united.com.
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Talk to your specialist about Botox Cosmetic, Anabotulinum Toxin A, because Botox Cosmetic Day is back on November 20th. For one day only, buy one $50 gift card, get one free, while supplies last. It gets better because it's not just one day of celebration, but the whole month of November. Refer a friend to Allie, and you'll both get $50 off a Botox Cosmetic treatment. Plus, if you register and get treated during November 1st to 30th, you have the chance to win $10,000. For prescribing information and box warning, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300. No purchase necessary for sweepstakes entry. Treatment must occur by 12/6. For full official rules, offer terms and conditions, and to join Allie, visit BotoxCosmeticDay.com.
I want to come back to the idea of food on a skewer or a stick. Food is much more appetizing to kids when they have control of it. You can use wooden skewers for older kids, and for younger kids, you can put almost anything on a popsicle stick. Those are rounder and safer. And for kids as young as 6 months old, I like meatballs. You can put all kinds of different flavors and veggies in them, and you can even make veggie meatballs. They're not really meat, veggie balls. Make a bunch of them. Freeze them so you can pull them out for a quick meal. Babies and toddlers love these because they can pick them up by themselves. Kelly has 14 different recipe options at justataste.com. And then there are easy, no-bake protein balls. Those are fun too. Here are her ideas for those.
Why people like the protein balls that I always do, and the ones we have on my site, Just to Taste, is you actually blend the oats. I feel like I sound like a broken record, but there's something about the texture of a whole oat versus when it's blended into an oat. Essentially, oat flour is what you're making. But if you buy the quick oats, you don't have to steam them or anything. They're already ready to go, and you don't have to bake these. So again, it takes minutes to make, but I like to do them in the food processor because it's so much faster. They get so much smoother. And then you can, of course, stir in chocolate chips or chopped nuts or dates or whatever you want to sweeten them with. But I like blending the oats in particular. I think it makes for a much better kind of no-bake protein ball.
Yeah, I love that idea. Okay, so huge transition here into a new food. Mushrooms. Does anyone like mushrooms? do you like to put them in dishes? How do you use them? How can we all use them?
So I think I was 32 when I started liking mushrooms.
Okay, so I'm not off when I say that. I think I eat them because I have to.
I'm going to give you every tip and trick I can think of under the sun as what I like to consider being a professional mom at this point. But mushrooms are a tough one. The best way I have found to do it is diced up, sauteed so that all that water comes out, because otherwise they're slimy. You got to get rid of the sliminess, and then fold it into bolognese, like a beef bolognese. If you do a small enough cube or like a little dice on it, it just gets incorporated right in, but you've got to get the water out of them by sauteing them first in either avocado oil or garlic so they take on some other flavor, but they eliminate that slimy texture. But mushrooms are like sponges, right? They'll absorb flavor very quickly. So if you can saute them separately in a little bit of garlic, you could add onion powder or whatever it is that goes along with your tomato sauce, and then fold them in after. You're going to eliminate having excess water in your sauce, and you're going to prevent them from being that slimy consistency.
Yeah, I put mine in sloppy Joe mix.
There you go. Same
that
thing.
Goes over
exactly.
Pretty big.
Exactly. Bolognese is exactly like sloppy Joe mix. The other way I would say is doing it in egg rolls. We're a really big egg roll family, especially in the air fryer. So when it's tucked inside of a crispy wrapper and getting dunked in sweet chili sauce or hummus or ranch or ketchup, whatever it is, it really goes pretty undetected. And as long as there's other veggies in there, even some ground turkey, it kind of just blends in, because mushrooms do have, a fair amount of nutritional value to them.
They really do. Yeah. So I've seen you have lots of recipes using egg roll wrappers, but they're kind of intimidating. But now that I've watched you make them, they're like not that big of a deal. They're so fun. So you could definitely have your child help you too, right? As long as you prepare the insides.
Absolutely. And a lot of the recipes too, you don't cook the filling before. I like using my air fryer to make them because again, you're eliminating oils. Nobody wants to be standing over a pot of vegetable oil. And, I hope and think we'll talk about fats and healthy fats in a little bit, because I'm a big advocate for certain swaps that I've made just within the last year in our house, just kind of looking more at ingredients and where things are sourced from. But I think egg rolls are, again, such a great gateway food for introducing anything, especially if you have, to your point, kids rolling them. You can make them savory. You can make them sweet. We do apple pie egg rolls in our house.
That's what I saw you made. Yes. Oh my God, those looked amazing.
They're so good. Now, that's not the nutritional value we're looking for, but hey, everything in moderation.
There's an
just
apple
a
in
taste.
there.
Exactly.
I know you go to probably a million birthday parties and family functions, and your kids probably have a decent palate because of your history, but a lot of other kids aren't exposed to a lot of flavors. So which ingredients do you think are good starter flavors and starter options for other families?
I love this. And I always say 3 out of my 4 kids are phenomenal eaters, but I do have one that's probably an average eater, and we have those struggles all the time. So I always lean towards introductory foods that have natural sweetness to them. Every kid loves sweetness. Their palates are developed for it. It's why when babies start solids, most pediatricians recommend not starting with butternut squash, because then they get glued to this idea of, well, every food is going to have this sweetness to it. But I will say, as kids are older, using foods like butternut squash, roasted carrots, things that have that natural sweetness in them are going to really help kind of parlay them into other foods. And the biggest takeaway here, though, when you're trying to introduce new foods to kids, is try to have as few variables in the equation as possible. And I mean, if your kid loves French fries, which is a starchy, regular old potato, you can make a simple switch of just switching out the ingredient for a sweet potato. And then you're not changing anything else. You're not changing the shape. You're not changing the texture, which we're going to talk a lot about. I'm a big believer in texture and temperature when it comes to getting kids to try new foods. But if you can change just one variable in that equation to get kids to try something new, you still got their ketchup there, their ranch, their hummus. I feel like this whole episode is going to be sponsored by Ranch Dressing, Hidden Valley. Hit us up because we go through it by the gallon. But I think limiting the variables when you're introducing new foods and keeping in the same temperature, the same texture, the same action item. So you're still dipping the sweet potato fry or the tot or the broccoli, whatever, into something, but it's the same shape, the same consistency. Kids have a very in-tune mouthfeel. So anytime that they put something in their mouth, they have such a sensory experience. So I think trying to keep that consistent across the board when you introduce new foods and rely a little bit on those naturally sweet foods to kind of get them to experiment more.
That's so interesting. I never thought about the mouthfeel or the temperature Because I do talk a lot about how kids care a lot about the shape of their food. Like if you make it even more fun or have dips, they're like all about it. But also if you let young kids play with their food, they're much more likely to put it in their mouth, right? Because they're like, okay, I know what that feels like now. Now I'll put it on my tongue, right?
100%. You were the one that told me, I think it was when I was starting with Dean, who's my third son, you're like, Kel, just let him make a mess. Let it just be everywhere. And it's so true. And it sounds like a pain in the butt. And then you end up cleaning everything up.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times I walk away, like, especially when I'm starting kids on solids. I've started 4 kids on solids now, and every kid has been so different. But I remember you telling me with Dean, you're like, just put it on the tray, walk away. Obviously, you're not going to another room. You're not going to risk them choking or anything like that. But the exploratory nature of bringing food from the plate or what the bowl, the cup, whatever it is, to their mouths, that's where they're going to learn not only that action, but that they can feed themselves. And independence is going to be a huge theme today. And empowering kids is going to be a huge theme because you want them to feel like they're in control and you're not shoving peas and broccoli and everything else down their throats. They are actively making the decision to eat. And I think that's a critical mindset that parents have to have.
Well, especially when they come to that developmental stage where they're like, I do it, right? Like they do not want you to do it for you, but they also want to have seen you do it. So they want to have seen you eat that pea or broccoli before they try it. And then, they don't want you to put it in their mouth.
Absolutely not. Modeling the behavior is so key, especially when it comes to the quote, like weird foods or different cuisines. I will say I have gotten my kids hooked on all the things my husband and I love because we want to go out to those restaurants. Sushi, Thai, Indian. I have figured out ways to get my kids to like those cuisines because I want them to have expansive palates, but it all comes down to how I model it and make them feel like they're making the decision to eat it.
I know that was like a huge pitfall I fell into where my daughter ended up loving like sashimi salmon. And then we get to the end of the meal and I'm like, was that $32 in salmon she just ate?
32 is if we're lucky. I always, my husband and I say, we're like, we can't go to sushi if we want them going to college at this point. There is like,
you have to lie to them. We're going out. Yeah. No, we're not going to sushi. No, Dad and I are going to Taco Bell.
Exactly. No. I'm like, who likes ramen? Does everybody like ramen? Perfect. All right. No maguro for you. No, we're not doing spicy tuna. No, absolutely not. It's got to be cooked food here.
Sushi or college.
Exactly.
What did we learn? You can put just about any food on a stick and our kids will eat it. And if your child is about to have a meltdown, just open the freezer and grab a high-protein peanut butter frozen yogurt popsicle. I put the link for that recipe in the show notes. Thank you to Kelly Senyei. She's the author of The Secret Ingredient Cookbook. You can find her at justataste.com or hear more from her next week when she shares what she calls her dream ingredient. It's not one you would guess, but I guarantee you'll go buy a tub of it after you hear her ideas. That's on our episode next week. In a quick bonus episode coming out this Friday, we're going to share our tips about how to get your kids to help in the kitchen. I'll talk about which tasks kids can do in the kitchen that will help their development. And Kelly's got some great tools and products to share. So watch for that in your podcast feed. For more from the Pediatrician Next Door, find me on the web at pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com. If you've got a question about the weird things kids do, send an email to hello@pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com for a chance to hear your voice on the show. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the Pediatrician Next Door. This show is produced by Red Rock Music. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever it is you're listening. I'll be back next time with more. Oh my God, you have 4 children under age 8, right?
Yes, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And then I always make my kids follow that up with, who do we appreciate?
And then you only can do that this year.
I got 1 year. I got like 6 months left. And then everyone has to scream mommy or everybody gets in trouble or something crazy happens. I don't know.